Hey, what's up, y'all? Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're going to be talking about, can you survive here in China with only using English? So if you're new here, my name is John. I'm an American, been living here in China for 14 years now. And so let's just get right into it. Living in China, doesn't matter which city you live in here in China. If you know absolutely zero Chinese, you will not be able to make it here. That's just a fact. Like most people that you come across, even in big cities like Shanghai and Guangzhou, Shenzhen, Beijing, they're not going to be using English very much compared to other countries in Asia, especially Southeast Asia. In my experience, I've been to almost every country in Asia, well, every country in Southeast Asia, most countries in Asia, and China and Japan tend to have the lowest level of English. And so if you're someone who isn't interested in learning another language, it's going to be really difficult here. Now, I'm not saying you must be fluent in the language, but you do need to know some of the language in order to get around on a day-to-day basis. In China, like, I've rarely been to any restaurant where they can speak English. So if you want to order food, you're going to have a hard time ordering food in English. But luckily, there are some like apps, or when you go to restaurants, you can use your phone and scan the code and see the menu. And there's usually pictures of the food items, but everything's in Chinese, and it could be really time consuming to try to like screenshot and translate the language in the apps and all this kind of stuff. So you can do that, but it's going to be really time consuming and you'll get tired of it eventually. Trust me. Usually I can speak some Chinese, so usually I would just ask, like, instead of looking at the pictures or try to because I can't really read Chinese very well, just a little bit, but not a lot. But I would just ask the people, like the waiter or waitress, I will ask them like, hey, do you have this, do you have that? And they say, yeah, we have this or we have that, or I ask them, recommend something. So I would do that instead of trying to translate the text, because I can speak. But if you can't speak, then you're stuck with having to translate text. If you have anything with like medical issues or something, really, really difficult to find an English speaking doctor, which means you have extra expenses incurred, like hiring a translator or something like that to go with you to the doctor. Those things can get expensive, and it's just really going to be very difficult. Even getting around, like when you go around on public transportation, more specifically the subway, most of the signs and maps, they have both languages. They'll have Chinese and English, so you can do that using English. But for the bus, not possible. No bus stop I've ever seen in China has English. So if you can't read Chinese, you're going to have a hard time again trying to translate all the things. And oftentimes when you get on the bus, you'll have to tell the people where you're going, because they charge you based on where you're going, and you have to be able to listen for the name of the place in Chinese and recognize the name of the place or recognize the area, so you know when to get off the bus. If not, you're going to have a hard time. And so when it comes to getting around in transportation, subway it's okay, but any other mode of transportation, you're going to struggle trying to manage it or navigate it if you only know English. Now, if you go look at some other places, such as Malaysia, I've been to Malaysia. Most people can speak English and have no problem at all using English to get around there. And I don't know any Malaysian, but you can use Chinese in Malaysia too. But so anyway, Malaysia is really great for English. Philippines, most people there speak English, at least somewhat, and they can help you a lot. Majority of people you come across will be able to speak some in English. And when you go to restaurants and stuff, English, not a problem. I went to South Korea. I didn't have much of a problem there either. I came across a few situations where I couldn't use English, but in some of the tourist spots, I could use Chinese and they would understand. So I could use English or Chinese in South Korea and I could get by pretty well, but not everyone spoke English. In Japan, English was, for me, the places I went, I didn't really encounter much English there. It was pretty much non-existent. So, which we've heard this rumor before, but I've been there and I didn't experience much English. So, but China's slightly better than Japan in terms of English ability from my experience. Indonesia, again, you can get around with English pretty well over there. Thailand. If you're in places like Bangkok or Phuket or something like that, again, you can get around with only English pretty well. You don't really have to know much of any of Thai language. When it comes to Cambodia, similar situation. I went to Cambodia, get around everywhere using only English. In Vietnam, I was in Da Nang and Ho Chi Minh, both, and I didn't have any problems with only using English. I came across so many people who all spoke English really well. So for me, those places were all ranking above China in terms of English capabilities and not needing to know another language to get around. So if you're considering moving abroad, especially somewhere in Asia or Southeast Asia, China's probably not going to be on the top of your list if you're not interested or not capable of at least learning a little bit of the language for daily usage, such as, going out to eat and transportation and things like that. It's going to be a struggle. But if you are willing to learn, you can actually learn pretty fast. There are some difficulties with learning Chinese, and honestly, when I came here, I wasn't even interested in learning it. Honestly, I never studied Chinese at all. I never studied it, didn't take any classes, didn't do nothing. I just listened to people talk for so long, and then I started to say things. And as a teacher, I was teaching young kids, and I would just pay attention to how they talk to each other, and then I just kind of put two and two together and figured out what they were saying or what it meant. And so I started using that language myself with people, especially with students. And once I could see that if I spoke to them, they could understand what I was saying, then I started using that language everywhere else with other people. And turns out they could understand what I was saying. So I just kind of learned from listening, but I never studied, so I don't read very well, but I can read a little bit when it comes to some stuff like food menus and stuff like that. I can read a little bit because I know like what I like to eat, and I can read those things on the menus. And when it comes to certain characters or words that I use often, or that I see often, I just remember them, and I just know what they are. But when it comes to like writing them by hand, I don't know how to do that, and I can't like pick up a newspaper and read it. But when it comes to communication, I communicate with anybody, anywhere in China, go anywhere by myself and use the language. But I didn't even study. So if you really want to learn the language and you really study the language, you can learn it pretty fast. I know quite a few people who's learned like conversational ability within 4 to 5 months, maybe 6 months, and after a year they were basically fluent, like not 100% fluent, but pretty fluent. They could handle any situation they ever came across in China after only 1 year of language study. But here's the thing when it comes to studying or trying to use Chinese language. If you're using one of these apps to learn or to study, in my opinion, they're not going to be very helpful, because from what I've seen with these apps, people can study them, but then when they get into the real world example, the situations and just everything's going to be much different. And so it's best to just start using the language as soon as possible to build your confidence, because once you start seeing that people understand what you're saying, you have more confidence in yourself, and you'll use it more and more and more. And the best way to do that is probably to have a class, or have an online class or something like that before you come, or find a teacher to teach you some basics and communicate with that teacher and their and using Chinese, right? And I would suggest, if you're going to hire a teacher to learn Chinese, hire a Chinese person. Don't hire somebody like me who can speak some Chinese, but I don't know everything. I don't know the ins and outs, all the rules of it and all that. I can just speak it, but it doesn't mean I know it, right? So I would suggest you hire someone like a Chinese person, hopefully a Chinese person who's actually a language teacher, because not everybody who speaks the language can teach that language. I learned that the hard way. So there's so many things about English I didn't even know when I became an English teacher, and I had to basically kind of study from scratch all over again and learn my own language, because I didn't know the ins and outs of how things work. So if you're looking for a Chinese teacher, I would suggest you actually hire a teacher, not just a random Chinese person. So anyway, that's my take on using only English in China. Long story short, you're going to have a bad time. You better learn Chinese. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.